an overview of Svachim or of Kodshim is not a possibility in a few minutes, but nevertheless, let me read out to you Gemara. HaKadosh Baruch Hu promised Abraham that he would give him Eretz Yisrael and give him children. Vayomer Hashem Elokim b'moed ha'kiroshenu. So Abraham said, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, can you give me some proof, Kiroshenu, that I'm going to inherit Eretz Yisrael? Omar Abraham lefnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Ribono Shel Shem chas v'sholem Yisrael choytim lefanecha, v'ato oiselem kedei amavu kedei afloga. Yeah, you promised me you give Eretz, that you give me Eretz Yisrael. So, what will happen if Yidden chas v'sholem sin, and you're going to do to them like doi amavu and doi afloga, and they won't have Eretz Yisrael anymore? Omaloi laugh. He said, no, I'm not going to do that to them. Omalafonov. You promise you're not going to do it, but how do I know? So this was at the Bris Ben Absorim. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu said to Abraham, take for me a calf. That means if you didn't sin, I won't send them out of their soul. Yechapchu aleim. They have karbonos, and the karbonos will atone for them. So Avraham said to Kodesh Baruch Hu, Omer lefanav Ribono Shel Olam, Teinach bizman shebeis hamikdash kaim. That's all right. When the Beis Hamikdash is standing, they can bring karbonos, and they'll have kapora, and they'll have an atonement. Bizman she'ein Beis Hamikdash kaim matei aleim. What will happen when the Beis Hamikdash is not there? Well, matei aleim, haven't got the karbonos. Omeloi kvatokanti lohem seder karbonos. I prepared for them in the Torah the seder of the karbonos in Tzav, in Shmini, where the karbonos are mentioned. Kol zaman shekoyrim bohem. As long as Yidden read the karbonos, male ani aleim keilu makrivin lefon of korban, then I reckon it. If they read the Pashas HaKarbonos, it's as if they brought a korban, u'moichel ani al kol avonosem, and I'm moichel all their karbonos. I think when we say the karbonos in the morning, we'd have to say kile krafti korban matomed or kile krafti korban chatz, whatever it is. So the Chofetz Chaim said from this Gemara, he said, if reading the karbonos is a kapara, kal v'chomer. If somebody learns intensively Kodshim, he learns halachas of the karbonos, kal v'chomer, that this is the greatest kapara Yid can have. No, you're starting Kodshim. Starting Kodshim is nicht stam limud Torah. Limud Torah itself is a gewaltige Sache. But this is more than limud Torah. This is limud Torah which has incorporated in it also a kapara. And I think it's a big source. Chofetz Chaim used to say when you'd come to Osid Lovai, there are a lot of chairs upstairs. And he says, the chairs are not Rab David, Rab Moshe, Rab Doz. They don't have names of people. Mesachtos, Baba Kama, Baba Basra, so he's very concerned that the Kodshim Dika chairs, and not many people learn Kodshim as a result. Kabochoim Shas chairs. They're chairs which are for Shas people are Ananishto. So if you have the schus to start learning Kodshim, these are chairs what the Chofetz Chaim said, Allah Osid Lova, these are chairs which one can be Zoichadu. I brought to you, of course, is if you start learning it, I know Cholas Koshes, people think Kodshim Uigefellach. I can tell you one thing, if you've learned Hoirius, Kodshim is dead easy compared to Hoirius. Dead easy. And I've learned Kodshim. And I will tell you, yeah, there are parts of it a bit difficult, but I would say Ruba, it's much easier. And I think if one starts well, and you anticipate to finish it, I think this is a chair for a Kodshim Jika chair, and Ibit Shem should be a Shas chair as well. You know, to give you to give you an overview of the Masechta. Not really easy to give an overview. I haven't got a Gemara in front of me, but the first Mishnah. I just want to say the following. I can't go into all the Kabbalas, but there are Kabbalas Behema. Kabbalas Behema, and this is what Tzvachim is going to be about. Tzvachim is about Kabbalas Behema. Now, Kabbalas Behema, the various Kabbalas. There's an Oilah, there's a Chatos, there's an Osham, there's a Shlomin, there's a Toida, there's a Pesach, there's a Bechaya, there's Maisa. These are all Kabbalas Behemas. There are also Kabbalas Oifus, of power. Chatos Hoif, and Oilas Hoif. Now, every single Kabban has different halachas. Can't go, you meet Shem, Stephen will go through all the various halachas of all. Chatos Hoif, very interesting. Chatos Hoif is usually done lamato mechut hasikho. Now, I don't even know whether you know the Mizbeach. The Mizbeach is made up of the lower part of the Mizbeach, and the upper part of the Mizbeach. A normal Chatos Behema, you do the Zrika on the corners. That's right at the top, on the corners, right at the top. And that's Lemalo. That's Lemalo Mechut Hasikho. There was a line in between which differentiates the bottom part and the top part. And the oilo, you do lamato, zrika lamato. When it comes to the oipers, chatzov is just verkehrt. The oilo, now I just want to tell you, by behema, when you shacht a behema, or when you bring a behema, there are 4 essential avodas: shchita, kabbalah, hailocha, and zrika. Now shchita means shachting, like a normal shchita of a behema, like when we eat. Kabbalah means after shchita, you get a keli and you makabel the dam. Then you take the dam in the keli and you walk towards the mizbeach. When you get near the mizbeach, then you do the zrika. Then you do the. Now shchita is kosher by everybody, even a Zor, even a Yisrael can do shchita. Aber mit Kabbalah ve'elach, from Kabbalah, Hailocha, Zrika, all has to be done by a Kohen. If it's not done by a Kohen, it's possible. It's possible. After these 4 essential avodas, there is another avodah, and that's called Haktorah Semurim. That's the offering up of the pats and various parts of the body of the animal, which are put onto the mizbeach and burnt. But Haktorah Semurim is an unessential part. When I say not, it's not Ma'akev the Kol. Shchita, Kabbalah, Hailocha, and Zrika Ma'akev. You've got to do it. Haktorah Semurim. Now that's with the behemoth. If it comes to an oif, there's no shchita. How do you do an oif? Normally you take a knife, when you can take a chicken to anyone shech, you take a knife, you shchita. You don't have to go through the 2 simonim, that means the esophagus and the windpipe. You don't have to go through both, you only have to go through one. But by chatos soif, you do one, but you don't do it with a knife. You do it with your hand, malika. That's called malika. They can eat it, although there's no shchita. The Torah said the kohenim can eat the korban. Chatos soif you can eat. Oila soif, you also had no shchita, it was malika. But the difference between the two is the following. A chatos soif, you only did malika on 1 simon out of the 2. Out of the koneh and the veshet, you only have to do 1. Lo yavdil, you're not allowed to do 2. By oila soif, you have to do both malika of both the simon. This is the difference. Now here, it's just forget. The chatos you do at the bottom, chatsoif, and the oila soif you do at the top. So it's different. Now besides animal, fowl, there's also plants. Now that's a mincha. A mincha, when I say plants, anything which grows. Mincha is made out of soilus, out of flour. So there's something grows. Then you have shemen, also grows. Shemen size. All menachas, there's some mincha. Every mincha and every korban usually has a minchas nesochim. That means you bring also a mincha together with the korban, and the mincha is made up of soilus, shemen, made out of shemen as well, And besides that, you can also have Ketores. Ketores is the incense which they bring on the Mizbeach Hapnimi, and there's also Levino, which is brought by a milcha. You bring a Levino as well, which is also a type of incense. Now, that's it. Then comes something which is non-organic. Now, all this is plants, something which is grown. Non-organic is water. Water. You can have a kobm mayim, nisach hamayim, nisach hamayim. I think you all know what nisach hamayim. In Sukkot, you do every day Sukkot you do nisach hamayim. There was a hole in the top of the mizbeach, and you poured the water. You poured the water there. That's one thing. And there's also melach. Melach. I forgot to mention before. On the plants, there's eitzim. Eitzim is wood. You can have a kobm eitzim. You can have a kobm eitzim. Yeah. You know, I remember the Briskerov once asked his son that Rab Chaim once asked the Briskerov, who was his son, when he was a young boy. He said, Avraham went with Yitzchak to the Akedah, and so he asked him, where's the animal? So the Briskerov, Rab Chaim, asked Rab Elveler, said to him, who said to Efshel there was a cotton meitzim? Efshel went a cotton meitzim. You know, a cotton mate was carrying wood. Efshel said the cotton. So the Rab Elveler, who was the son of it, about 8 years old, he said, what do you need a knife for then? That was his answer. That's a sharper copy must have had. Anyway, ate him. But besides that is mayim and melech. Now melech, every cob must have melech. So you have something which is non-organic as well. Also, this is also mayim is a cob, could be a cob. Now let me just tell you one thing on this before we come to the lumdus of the first Mishnah. Mayim, you know, in the first days of the creation, it says Vayabdel Elokim ben Amayim Hashem me'al Rokia l'Mayim Hashem mitachas Rokia. HaKadosh Baruch Hu differentiated between the water. The upper water were right at the top, next to the Kisei HaKovod. The lower water, the water we have in our world, lakes, seas, and everything. So the lower water came to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and says, not there. He said, they're right up there next to you. They're Kivas Helikim. They're right next to the Vaja. We're right at the bottom where it has to be a Yosha. It has to be fair, the Abdullah. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu said to them, and they got very angry, and in fact they wanted to flood the world. HaKadosh Baruch Hu had to stop them. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu said to them, because you've put forward a very strong argument, I'm going to give you something which will satisfy you. So what? He said, in the Beis HaMikdash, in 2,000 years, 2,500 years from the time of creation, there'll be Nisach HaMayim. The water we'll use as a gom. Yeah? And that's one thing. And another thing, water, you'll be able to have, every gom has got melech. Melech comes from the water, from the sea. And therefore, that'll be your, and the water seems to be quite, and the Ma'amat seems to be quite satisfied. And the question is, what's the Yosha? They're sitting next to the Kisei HaKovod. They're right next to Kivas Helikim. They're right next to the Rebbeinu Shalom. Spiritually, they're in a very high position. And these down here at the bottom, not only they've got nothing, they've got to wait 2,500 years till they do once a year Nisach HaMayim. Kabbanas for Sheikh mit Melech, Mayim only once a year, and they seem to be satisfied. And I think the answer to this is a very simple answer. It's much better to have Kivas Helikim, which you've earned through yourself, than having Kivas Helikim, which is a matana, that's not yours. The Rebbeinu Shalom put the Ma'im Aliyonim Levalo. Okay, they're going to get a reward. Why should they get a reward? Well, the Rebbeinu Shalom gave them that. Lamato, if you have a mitzvah, if you've got a mitzvah and you've got to do something, and you're involved in the Kivas Helikim, is much better, even if you have to wait 2,500 years. But the waiting itself, knowing that you'll be able to do Kivas Helikim, that you'll be able to do it with your own effort to come near to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that's worth more than having Kivus Halakim, which is a matona. And I don't know whether you will, I once heard, I can't remember from who, I think it was the Eidim of Rab Shach. He was here once and he said over about very interesting, there's a Tosfos in Brachos where Tosfos says that every time you eat a meal, you've got to have salt on the table. Got to have salt on the table. So Tosfos said, why is it so important to have salt on the table? So Tosfos says, because the salt, you wash your hands, you go outside, you wash your hands, then you come in, and you're not allowed to talk because you haven't made hamotzi yet. You haven't made hamotzi. You've got to wait for the balabos to come and make hamotzi. And you can't talk in Torah. And you got, so there's a bittel's man. And the Sultan comes along and he's Makatruk. And he's Makatruk. He said, what's it does? You didn't sit without talking in Torah. You've got to put the salt there. Why? Because the salt will say, if you're waiting in anticipation to do a mitzvah, that itself is worth something. Waiting 2,500 years for that is over. I say to you the following: you've got to wait till you finish Shas. I don't know, some of you have finished Shas, but each time you go round, you finish Shas again. Now this is a Chelek Godel of Shas. Kodshim is a Chelek Godel of Shas. No, in the anticipation that you'll get to the end. I don't know when the 7 years finish.
2 years. Close to 2 years. A little bit less than 2 years. Less than 2 years. A year from next August.
Only 2 years?
Yeah, close to 2 years.
2 years short. So, if you've done it till now, Rabbi Isai, please go on. This is the anticipation. 2,500 years away, you can wait 2 years to finish it off. Okay, let me come now to the Mishnah. The Mishnah talks about how the Zvachim, that you have to shech the korban lishma. Now, let me explain to you lishma. What does lishma mean? Lishma means when you have, let's take a shlomi. All the avodas you do, the shchita, the halacha, kabbalah, zrika, has to be l'shem shlomim. Now somebody, l'shem shlomim, l'shma. Now what would happen if he didn't think l'shma? He did it without thinking l'shma, without anything. He didn't think anything. Shloi l'shma. He just did it. He's got a column. He did it, but he didn't have anything about it. So the Gemara, stoma kosher. Why? Because when you are magdish the korban l'shem shlomim, everything you'll do with this korban is now meyuchad for shlomim. You don't have to actually start thinking the whole time lishma. As long as the korban was mugdish l'shlomim, whatever you're going to do with that korban is l'shlomim, even if you didn't think. But if you, at the time of doing the avodah of shlomim, you said, I'm doing it for oilo, I'm doing it for noshom, I'm doing it for achreis, another korban, then that's called shloi lishma. Now, about all korbanos, shloi lishma. If you do it shloi lishma, the korban is still kosher, but the bailim have not fulfilled their duty. In other words, if a Yid would say, I have to bring Shlomim to the Beis HaMikdash, he wants to give a Nadava, and then he brings the Nadava, he brings it, L'Shem Oila, he hasn't done his duty, he's got to bring another korban and do it L'Shma. And do it L'Shma.
Isn't the Shochet who make?
Pardon?
Isn't the Shochet all the
Shochet, not the Baal. Not the Baal. Yeah. The Shochet, the person who shot the Kohen, but normally it's the Kohen, it could be Yisrael as well. So therefore, stom is kosher lishma. Shloi lishma, the korban is kosher, and you can eat the korban, everything is kosher, but the owners, the bailim who have given the neder to bring a shlomim, have not fulfilled their duty. There are two korbanos, where if you do it shloi lishma, the korban is possible. One is chatus, a korban chatus. You had a chatus and you did the shchita, or the Kabbalah al-Ocha Zrika, l'Shem Oilo. Korban Posel. The korban is Posel. Shloi lishma Posel. And the second korban is Pesach. Korban Pesach, which is Shachtit Chosh, all in this Mishnah. You Shachtit Chosh. So Shloi lishma can sometimes Posel a korban. That's Chatus and a Pesach. Otherwise, all korbanos, kol korbanos kosher, even Shloi lishma. Now, let me go through. Every korban, if you had no intention whatsoever at the time, it's kosher l'chula alma. Stoma is kosher. Why? Because as you've been magdashit for Korban Pesach or Korban Chatos, whatever you do with it, it's now done for what is in the Yuchad. Let me explain. Lishma does not mean thinking Lishma. Lishma means the avodas must be meyuchad for that korban. Now, if you've been magdish the korban for Pesach, what you do with it is automatically l'shem Pesach. If you think shloi lishma pasul. Now, let me tell you. Now, lishma is not only a din in lishma is not only a din by korbanos. You have lishma by sefer Torah. You know, when you write sefer Torah, you say l'shem kedush sefer Torah. Tzitzis, the Gemara says, when you spin the tzitzis or you dye the tchelas, it's got the tzvir has to be lishma. What's it mean, lishma? You have to do it l'shem tzitzis. Now, if you did tzitzis shloi lishma, tzitzis are not kosher. You have to have some others there. That's why it's very important when you buy tzitzis to see it should be kosher tzitzis where everything is done lishma. Toisus in Menachos has a shaila. What would be if a person would make tzitzis lishma ushloi lishma? How do you get that? He said, I'm doing it l'shem tzitzis, but I'm dyeing it l'shem tzitzis. But at the same time, I'm trying out the dyeing whether it'll work or not. That means he's doing it l'shem tzitzis and l'shem nisoyim. Nisoyim means he wants to test the tchelas whether it'll stick or not. So Tosfos, you've got two kavonas. Well, you've got the lishma, it should be kosher. So Tosfos, two kavonas, lishma and shlo lishma, pasul. So Tosfos, where's the raya? Both apostle. The raya is from a korban. If you shech the korban lishma and you chatos, you shech lishma and shlo lishma. So like this, I'm doing it l'shem chatos and I'm also doing it l'shem olam. Said in Tosfos, this pasul. So the same as a korban is pasul if you do it lishma and shlo lishma. Who adin if you do tzitzis, you tzvir lishma and shlo lishma pasul.
In the case of the Oron and the Chatos, they're mutually exclusive.
Pardon?
In the Oron and the Chatos, the answer the Tosfos gives, they're mutually exclusive. It can't be an Oron and a Chatos. In the case of the tzitzis, you can do them l'shem tzitzis, and by the way, you're also setting up.
But as long as you've got a kavona lishma, chatos should be kosher. So the oil garnish, it's nothing. Why is shloi lishma? Let me explain to you. Why is shloi lishma pasul? You could say two reasons why shloi lishma is pasul. You could say because if you do it shloi lishma, you've been oika from the korban the lishma. There's no din shlo lishma pasels. Shlo lishma doesn't pasel. Shlo lishma takes away the lishma, and therefore every korban needs lishma. If you haven't got lishma, the korban Pesach is pasel, the korban Chatz is pasel. Because by saying shlo lishma, you've taken away the lishma. By Chatz and Pesach, the lishma is likuva. That's one way of learning. Or you could learn now, stoma lishma. If you've been magdish it l'shem Pesach, you're doing it l'shem Pesach. If you think shloi lishma, you're not taking away the lishma, but the shloi lishma is a machshava hapoiseles. Let me give you an example. Pigul. I don't know whether you know what pigul is. If you take a korban, shlomim, any korban, and you say at the time when you're shachting, I intend to eat the korban shlomim not in its right time, but next week. Pigul. That's pigul. Or you say, I intend to do the zrika not today, but tomorrow. That's called chutz lizmanoi. Either to eat after its time or to do the korban after. That's pigul. What happened there? It's got to do with lishma. No. The machshava of pigul passes the korban. You could say the same by shlo lishma. Shlo lishma is not it takes away the lishma. Shlo lishma passes the korban. It's a machshava poiseles. Now, if shlo lishma is merely it takes away the lishma, if you said lishma, so the lishma is there, then it should be kosher. The fact that lishma ushloi lishma is possible is a raya that the shloi lishma is a posel. Now let me tell you what the difference is, whether it's a posel or not. You must know this for future. You will be learning it. If a person does an avodah in the base of English, let's take Kabbalah. Kabbalah, yeah. Who's got to do it? The Kohen. You did it. You did it. Apostle of Kabbalah. But there's still plenty of dam in the tzava, and a Kohen can come along and bring another cost and do it. The avodah of the Yid is not an avodah, but it doesn't puzzle the Kohen. All it says is your avodah is not an avodah. So the Kohen will do the avodah. The Kohen will take another bowl, accept some more dam, not this dam, and he'll do the avodah. If a Kohen had a machshava of pigul, then nobody can do the avodah. The Kohen's possible already. The same will be with shloi lishma. If shloi lishma is merely because you've taken away the lishma, so it's not an avodah. It's an avodah without lishma, so it's not an avodah. Somebody else, the plenty of time, let somebody else do it, lishma. But if shloi lishma is a machshava poiseles, then you puzzle the garden, then nobody can do it anymore. This is the so Rab Chaim Brisker asked the kasha on Tosfos, and Rab Chaim, what's he want? Rab Chaim Brisker asked the kasha. He said, "By korban, if you do it lishma and you do it shloi lishma, it's possible. You know why it's possible? Because the shloi lishma is a machshava poiseles. Although you did it lishma, but you've got a machshava shloi lishma, it puzzles the korban. Then it's possible. By tzitzis, if you did it l'shem nisoyan, you're not puzzling the tzitzis. All you're doing is you haven't done it l'shma, but he did it l'shma, so therefore it should be kosher. So what's Tosfos raya? What's Tosfos raya from a korban? By korban shloi lishma, it's a posel. And therefore, that's why even if you did lishma, shloi lishma, the posel is there. It's like doing it lishma and pickle. You puzzled it. Mar she'ein came by tzitzis, l'shem nisoyin is not a posel. L'shem nisoyin means you haven't done the tzvir lishma, but you did it lishma. So therefore it should be alright. That's Rab Chaim's kasha. Rab Chaim's kasha on Tosfos. So Rabbi Elchanan Wasserman, in his Kovet Shurim, Rabbi Elchanan Wasserman says, you see from Tosfos that Tosfos had a different machshava than Rab Chaim. Tosfos learned that when you do it shloi lishma, it's not a chesoron and machshava poiseles. Shloi lishma takes away the lishma. So it's not an avodah. And if somebody else will do it, you can do it over again. Now, what's Tosfos say? If you do lishma and shloi lishma, that's not called meyuchad for the korban. Again, a Pesach needs lishma. What's it mean needs lishma? A Pesach needs to be meyuchad for korban Pesach. If you be magdish Shem Pesach and you do the avodah stam, then the avodah is done with Shem Pesach automatically. If you have two machshavas, then it's not meyuchad lePesach. It's meyuchad lePesach and something. That's not called yichud lePesach. That's why it's possible. It's possible because it's a machshava pseles. If you have two, it's not a lishma. Lishma means meyuchad to Pesach. If you're meyuchad to two things, that's not called meyuchad lePesach. That's why it's possible. So he said by tzitzis as well. If you do the tzitzis, l'shem tzitzis, and l'shem nisoyan of dying, that's not called meyuchad tzitzis. That is how Rabbi Elchanan learned. So Zamachle, you will see from the Gemara as you learn that Rab Chaim is richtig. I'm not going to go into the thing. Stephen, I think, will come to it. So you come to it in the Gemara. But this is as far as that goes. But now I'm going to tell you one more kasha, and then then I'll finish off. You know, the Gemara I'm taking away from your time. You won't be able to learn.
No, that's very good.
Pigu or shloi lishma. A Kohen did a korban shloi lishma or pigu. both of them. Steht in the Gemara, is a mazik. My korban, I give it to a kohen, and the kohen did it, pigul, with a machshava and pigul, they passed the korban. Or the kohen did, the avodah shel lishma, spoiled my korban, better pay for it. The Gemara declares only because it's a hezek shein anika. You cannot see in, you see, you can't see the marshal. If somebody would have truma, and a fella come along and be matama the truma, can you see its truma? You can't see. That's called hezek. It's a damage which is unseen. So that the machlokes in Gemara, if hezek shein anika is chayiv or not. But if we learn hezek shein anika is chayiv, a kohen who was mapagul or a kohen who did shloi lishma has got to pay. And the beginning of Bava Kama, the Gemara says one of the others hanizikin is pigul, and Rashi says pigul shloi lishma. Shloi lishma is the Rashi. Now we learn like Chaim because it's a machshava poseles. But Rav Abramsky said Chatzadik Librochi wants to ask me this kasha. The Gemara, there's a very interesting Gemara where the Gemara says a pora adumo. You're not allowed to do work with a pora adumo. Mustn't do any work with a pora adumo. Now he had a pora adumo, and the Gemara said pora shichnisa lerivka. There was a threshing floor where they've got to do work. Now if that pora does work, you puzzled it. You puzzled it from a pora adumo. But that was a pora, a young pora, who's still young, wanted to feed from its mother, and the mother was in there. So he sent this pora in on the understanding that it should feed from its mother, no melacha. But he said at the same time it'll do a bit of threshing as well. State the Gemara, pora shichnisa lerivka al manos shetinik v'tidesh, yeah. Then it becomes possible. The pora becomes possible. Because you had the intention, it should also do work. Now it's possible. And the person who sent it in doesn't depend on the owner, it depends on the person who's doing the work. Zog Rashi, but you won't have to pay for damaging the pora. Rashi, why? Zog Rashi, because when you sent it in to feed from its mother. Your machshava was a machshava that it should also thresh, but that machshava is like groma, because you're goyrem with your machshava that the malacha should now passel the pora. Groma is potem and a zikin. Groma, why? Because it's the machshava. Machshava, the lashon of Rashi is the following: so the amasi yodav letoivo ichnachtiyo. I sent it in for its own best shetinik. Upsula loy have ele machmas machshavta shenischaven ab shetodish. Ugroma benuzikim pota. Da machshava loy mechayiven le. On a machshava you don't have to pay. So Rav Abramsky asked me a kasha. So why do you have to pay for shloi lishma? Why do you have to pay for pigul? It's a machshava. Rashi says on a machshava you don't pay. So what's the difference of pigul? Now this kasha is interesting. This kasha I found in the Ritva. The Ritva asks this kasha. So the Ritva says on this kasha, so there he said, I make a big difference between this and pigul. Dr. Zek. Shloi lishma or pigul, the machshava passels the shchita, and the shchita passels the korban. Passels the korban. By avoid of a pora, malacha of a pora, what passels the pora? The malacha. Only it's a condition, the malacha can only passel the pora if you had machshava. So the machshava is goyrem that the malacha passels. But the malacha, you're not doing the malacha. The behem is doing the malacha. Therefore, your machshava is only goyrem that the malacha which is done by the pora passels the pora. So you're only a groma. You're an indirect cause that the malacha should passel. Ma she'ein kein by Pigul and Shloi Lishmo. The Machshava passes the Shchita. Here's the Rashi. The Machshava passes the Avodah. Who did the Avodah? You did the Avodah. So you're pasling the Korban. Therefore you have to pay. That's what he said to me. So I asked him a kasha. The Gemara says that if you have a Machshavas Pigul or a Machshavas Shloi Lishmo, you're over lav. What's a lav? Lo yechoshev. Pigulu. Lo yechoshev. You had a Machshava, so the Gemara, you don't get Malchus for it. Why? Because a Machshava, on a Machshava you don't get a lav shem b'maisa. So I asked him, what do you mean lav shem b'maisa? But the Machshava passul the Shchita. You did the Shchita, so you should get it for the Shchita. You're doing a maisa. You're passing the Korban. So Rav Abramsky gesagt, you're right. The psul is the Shchita, and that passul the Korban. Over the Issa is the Machshava. And Malchus you get on the Issa. And therefore you won't get Malchus on the Lo Yechoshev. I'm not going to tell you more, because if I tell you more, we'll start learning Zvach. But here I just want to finish with one thing. And this I'll finish. You know, Chazal say that when you learn Torah, you have to make a bracha. Before Torah, you've got to make a bracha. What bracha do you make for? Kishem Hashem Eko Hobu Goydel Elokeinu Bracha Leponeo. When you finish learning Torah, you always got to make a bracha. The Torah. Where is it written in Torah? You got to make a bracha. Where is it written? Mosel Kasher. Mosel Kasher. Then the Gemara says, if you eat a meal and you have to bench, you got to make a bracha. After you eat it. Before eating, where is it written? Kasher. So the Gemara asks on Torah Kasher and on Birch Samozna Kasher. The Gemara in Perek Dalet in Brachos says, I'll give you an answer on Birch Samozna. You've had a meal and you make a bracha. If a person who's already satisfied, gegessen a ganze Chont mit Kigel and mit Reis, Fleisch and everything, and he's got to make a bracha, Kishurav, before eating, and he sees it all there, why you got to make a bracha? Im Kishu Soba Mavarech, Kishurav Loi Kolshkin. But that's an answer on Birch Samozn. But on Torah, no answer. So the Chasam Tzoifer, it's
a sphere. It's a type of sphere. After you've learned, you've got the Chol Tazavata, as in you have in Eichel. Surely once you've learned Torah, you've got that. You've had that sphere as well. So you should make the
let's wait. Not sphere. Forget. We'll see in a minute. So he said the following: Im Kishu Sovam Avarech is on Achila. By Torah, forget. When he's sober, if she doesn't, he only has to make it when he's rav. Only have to do it before. The Gemara makes the kavach. So the Chasam Sofer said that there are two things in life which never come together. What are they? Svir. What's svir? Svir means to be satisfied, to be content. And there's something else which is called hador, geschmack. Now let me put it to you. Somebody's eaten a good meal, reis, gans, whatever he's eating. When he's finished eating, you don't want to look at food anymore. Nefesh Saveyo Tobus Neupes in Tanakh is written, once you're satisfied, you even sweet delicacies you don't want to look at, you don't want anything. So the Gemara Zog Takabochayim. In Kushu Sovo, if when you're satisfied and you've already filled yourself up, you don't want to look at food anymore, I don't want food anymore. Torah said, give up brocha, keshurav, beforehand, where the whole geschmack you do. Oh, it's there, and you can see it. Avada darfst du machen a broch. Sagt der Bateure, also ich sag der Chasdoi, Bateure ist punktverkehrt. Also ganz ehrlich. If you haven't learned Torah, you've never learned Shas. Certainly you haven't learned Kodshim. Somebody said, again, learn yet Kodshim. Oh, who knows what's coming? Yeah, who knows? As if you don't know what's coming. You get. The Torah says you don't know what's coming. Keshurav, So you haven't got the geschmack yet of Kodshim. You don't know what it is. Mach ta brocha. Kishem Hashem Echo b'Goydel Elokeinu. Kashu, when he's learned already, and he's already seen the geschmack of Kodshim, so the Kal Vachomer is verkehrt. Im Kashu Rov Mavorech, by Torah is punkt verkehrt. Because the main geschmack is up, by Lamosh in business. I'm not in business, but you're in business. If you make a good deal, and you sold the property and you made the price £500,000, a größer Geschmack. Are you satisfied? Yes, you want to make another deal. That means you can, Hanoah and Geschmack and Svir don't go together. Yeah, you can have Hanoah, but then you're not satisfied. You can have Svir and then you haven't got Hanoah anymore. By Torah, you can have both. Kulam Yizbu v'yisangu mituvecho. Chasm Sofer. He said, by Torah, you can have Kulam Yizbu, and then forget the Geschmack comes after you've learned. And therefore, my bracha to you is the following. Learned up Kodshim, and in Mitzvah you'll have a Kodshim dika chair, and in Mitzvah by the end of Kodshim you should have a Ashash chair as well, and in Mitzvah, and Kulam Yizbu v'yisangu mituvecho, and all I say to you, the Aschol is good, and you've got a good Rebbe, Stephen in Mitzvah Hashem. My bracha is you should all be here in Mitzvah Hashem to finish up all the Masechs of Kodshim. I hope I've left you now. I can't learn the first Mishnah. You really good.
Can I make a small announcement? I might have to go early. After Mincha tomorrow.